Thanks very much, Willem. So the title of my presentation, as we can see here, is The Interoperability of Tomorrow Using the Standard Language of Today. So building on what the other speakers have already talked about, the concept of not reinventing the wheel, the concept of using the standards that we already have in existence, standardized internationally and throughout Europe. As our colleague from the European Commission said earlier on, the Clean Energy Package clearly points to requirements for interoperability, building on previous legislation. And the two particular areas that we'll be looking at here is the exchange of data from metering devices into other equipment and other systems within the home, and to other systems outside of the home. So when we talk about designing a protocol for two devices or a device and a system to talk together, everybody wants to design everything in. We need to design for security and privacy. The data needs to be kept private. We need to ensure that the data comes from the right device. We need to design for scale. We need to design for flexibility, because we're not quite sure what we want to run this protocol over, because there are many different network choices. We want to be efficient because we don't want to send too much over the air. We want to be able to upgrade this stuff for future functionality and future features. We want to be able to extend it to bring in new business cases and new use cases. And of course, all of this has to be completely future-proofed. And guys investing in rolling out large numbers of devices over many years need to ensure they have a security of investment, so that whatever standard is used, it needs to be well supported into the future to make sure that the technology doesn't vanish and it can still be extensible. So as my colleague from IDIS said earlier on, when we talk about designing a companion specification or a recipe to use these open standards in an interoperable and interchangeable way, there is a recognized methodology for this. So first of all, we identify the use cases. What are we going to be doing with the data? Who is talking to what, with which, and to whom? And how is that data used? We then identify a common language, an application layer, and an object model in order to design and model the data use cases. We then need a companion specification. So if you think of the base standard as the dictionary, and then you think of the companion specification as a collection of words to tell the story, that's kind of where companion specs come in, just as our colleague from IDIS and our colleague from OMS described in the MBUS world. Then we need to know what lower layers we're using. Figure out what network's going to look like. Is it going to be over NB-IoT? Is it going to be over narrowband, low-power WAN? Is it going to be over cellular or PLC or RF? All of those choices can be made, but they can be made independently to the object model and the application layer. And of course, last of all, we need the certification process to make sure that whatever is made will truly be interoperable and interchangeable, not only certified in compliance with the standard, to say that you're using the recognized words, but also in compliance with the story to ensure that the profile that you're using makes the devices truly interchangeable. And we heard the expression earlier on, by coincidence, to not reinvent the wheel. And this is a following through the theme in this presentation as well. So if we look at the way that DLMS COSEM works, I will explain in this presentation how the separation of the application layer and the object model from lower layers can ensure that we have a network and an interoperable solution that guarantees into the future it can be extensible, it can be secure, and it can follow all of the requirements and step into all of the use cases that such a network would need to support. And we already have perfectly good standards in the market today. We don't need to go and reinventing everything, starting again from scratch, taking all of those design for factors into consideration, because standards like DLMS COSEM have been around for over 20 years and continuously evolving, continuously bringing in new use cases and new requirements, but at the same time not changing the core object model and the core application layer of the standard. And we mentioned IDIS earlier on. We also talk about various other applications across the world. We're supported in very many countries now, and recently DLMS COSEM has been recognized not just as an IEC standard, but as an ANSI standard as well, as part of the C12 series of standards, meaning that a credible pathway to interoperability in the US market using DLMS COSEM is also now possible. which is a good step forward. So this list of projects here that we see and the big numbers underneath, hopefully we'll see improving in the future with other projects across the globe. Most of these projects take into consideration the normal meter-to-bill use cases, taking data from a meter up to a head-end system, generating a bill, generating customer interaction between the utility and the customer at the end. However, as time goes on, we see the use of DLMS COSEM expanding into new arenas, new use cases that see it talking to other devices, perhaps devices within the home. As an example of that, sorry, I excuse the cheesy animation there, but we talk about what's going on in Italy here. A suite of standards has been designed around the DLMS COSEM application layer. And here, very, very clearly, we can demonstrate both for the electricity world and the gas world that we have a consistent application layer, a consistent data model that operates over a whole variety of lower layers. And any one of these lower layers can be changed to something else in the future, should it be needed. But the important thing is that these top two levels, the use cases that were defined and the object model that models the data and the services to access that data remain unchanged. And that's one of the core values of the DLMS COSEM framework and why it provides a really good solution for interoperability and future-proofing for use cases that we don't quite yet know what they will look like, as was mentioned earlier on in the previous presentations. So on the left-hand side of this slide here, we see that DLMS COSEM is being used to talk not only over the wide area network and back to backhaul systems, but it's also being used to talk to in-home devices. So talking to in-home devices, talking to in-home management systems, talking to any other system or device that requires that data from the smart metering network, it's clear it's very easy to do without changing the application layer, without changing the data model. We look at new applications in Spain as well. This has probably been talked about already in other presentations during this show. But we're using, DLMS COSEM is being used for all sorts of additional use cases within the utility network. In combination with data that's taken from substations and from switches and from other devices within the smart grid network, a lot more of these use cases are now possible, taking into consideration data from the AMI network. I won't go through all of these because we could spend a whole day just talking about the applications of DLMS COSEM and the interesting things that the standards are being used for. Again, reinventing nothing, using the same standards that we have today. Again, reinforcing the same approach here. The data model, the application layer, change either one of those in the same context. You can change the lower layers in the communications media. One does not affect the other. So you can always extend use cases. You can always extend the object model for new bits of data and new use cases. And those lower layers could be connected to any number of things for any number of applications by maintaining this consistent standard that's already in existence today. Just to give some ideas, we talk about lower layers. I won't go through all of these. Again, this is another day in itself to talk about these various profiles in detail. But all of these profiles are developed within the IEC 62056 series of standards to allow the consistent DLMS COSEM application layer and object model to be able to run over all of these different flavors of lower layer network. All the while, there are no changes to the application layer model, apart from perhaps a couple of specific setup objects for creating connections, adding devices to the network. Coming soon, we have at the bottom here, again, continuously through the development of the standard, new profiles are being added. As new technology comes to the market and is required by the members, those technologies are brought in and profiles are developed so that DLMS COSEM can run over the top. And we see we've got YSUN and an LP-WAN profile that we're developing at the moment within the association, allowing technologies such as LoRaWAN to handle the DLMS COSEM application layer. So I think we've got to the point of, we've got a consistent application layer. I've said it a lot of times. That's the one clear message I want to get across here. We already have the data model, the application layer in standards. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. And just a quick proof point in terms of the association. We're in a lot of countries, over 1,200 device types currently certified. millions and millions of devices rolled out worldwide, and a really strong core membership of utilities, integrators, manufacturers who are evolving the standard to keep up with the use cases of today and also tomorrow. So thanks very much for your time today, guys, and enjoy the rest of the day.